Hello there, my fandom friends! Today I'm going to be talking about episode 99, Combination and Evolution of the anime Hunter x Hunter. Now, if you don't remember the specifics of that episode, that's fine. I am here to talk about it today. This episode mainly follows Gon in his fight against the two Chimera Ants, the owl and the bat. I wanted to make a video talking about these two characters because there are parts about their characters and the animals that they resemble that aren't actually fact, but then there's some things about them that are fact. So I'm here today to debunk some of the kind of myths about these animals and the abilities that they have, and then to solidify the facts about these animals. Before I jump into what is true and what is false about owls and bats compared to this episode in Hunter x Hunter, I wanted to briefly just say that I am actually currently in school to become a wildlife biologist, and I have multiple degrees about the biology topic. I have also worked with both bats and owls in my experience and still currently do, so I'd love to talk about these animals and educate you guys about them because they're awesome and they're cool, and I don't want to spread misinformation about them through media. I'm also not hating on the story in any way for getting some of these things wrong about these animals. I just generally want to educate people on what is correct about these animals and what is not. I will be giving the thumbs up or the thumbs down about all of these things that I have to talk about these animals that they talked about in the episode. And I'll actually be going in numerical order from the start to the end of the fight with Gon. So starting up, they explain that these are both nocturnal creatures. Yes, that is a true fact. This means that both of these animals are typically awake and more active during the nighttime hours. They prefer to do their hunting at night as opposed to during the day, which also makes sense with the setting of this scene because Gon is currently fighting them in the nighttime setting. Next up is talking about the owl and the bat wings. So it claims that the bat wings are super loud, and it claims that the owl wings are silent, that Gon cannot hear them. So the bat wings, this is kind of an iffy thing because yes, I'm sure they're probably loud to some degree, and maybe this has to do with the scale of this bat-like creature that's kind of also humanoid. So yes, her wings would probably be loud. Real bats, on the other hand, that we have in our world, typically I don't think you're going to be hearing their wings as much, depending on their size. So of course, with the experience that I've had working with bats, I can't really hear their wings. I can barely hear their vocalizations. They are still very quiet creatures. The owl, on the other hand, I'm going to give the thumbs up. Owls, for the most part, have silent flight. Of course, you can probably hear them landing in trees, things like that, but their wings, as far as their wings go, they have completely silent flight. So for Gon not to hear this chimera ant that is resembling an owl was very smart on the story maker's part, because that is true. Something I wanted to talk about with the bat's design is that her eyes are covered. Now there's a saying that you are blind as a bat. Now this isn't true at all. I know the anime doesn't outright say that she's blind, but she does have a covering over her eyes, which could be kind of a tie-in to the myth that bats are blind. Bats are not blind. They see very differently than other animals, but that's true for us as well. We see very differently from other mammals, other reptiles, things like that. So it's just a very different way in which they see compared to mammals or reptiles or anything like that. And so bats are not blind. I'm going to give a thumbs down for that. Next up is the owl flinging its feathers. This is an attack that we see the owl chimera ant use against Gon. This, of course, is going to also just tie into this kind of multi-creatured chimera ant that's in this fictional fantasy world. However, I thought I would still just talk about it a little bit. So owls cannot fling their feathers. That's not really a defense that they use. When I saw this owl ant flinging its feathers at Gon, I kind of related this myth of owls flinging their feathers to the myth that porcupines can do the same thing. Porcupines cannot fling their quills. That's just not something they do as one of their defense mechanisms. And so if that's another myth that you have been believing, you can debunk that as false. Of course, I know that this ability of the owl was probably just a part of its defense as this creature in this fantasy world, so absolutely no hate on it. I just thought I would mention that owls cannot fling their feathers. Next up, I wanted to talk about how they mentioned that the bat's ability is ultrasonic waves. Now I wanted to talk about, this is actually a depiction of echolocation. Echolocation is basically the way that bats see their world. They see their prey in front of them, so they kind of emit these sound waves all around them, and then their waves will hit prey or a predator, and then they will see where they are. It looked like the bat in the anime was using its eyes for this. Real life bats don't use their eyes, they are using their mouth, sometimes their nose, to pick up on those kinds of waves that they're using for their echolocation. And so the anime didn't outright say that the bat Chimera Ant was using her eyes for these ultrasonic waves, as they say, but bats will use their mouth mainly for echolocation. So that's partially a thumbs up for the echolocation part, a thumbs down for whatever they were trying to convey with the eyes. Halfway through this fight, we go back to our owl, and the owl is kind of transforming more into a gorilla, which I'm not gonna totally touch on, but something I wanted to touch on mainly was what they call his ears, which are those tufts that are on the owl's head. They kind of transform more into ears, which maybe kind of resemble gorilla ears, but gorilla ears look more like ours. They're not really on top of their head. And owls do not have ears on top of their heads like that. Those tufts that you see on like great horned owls and things like that, those are literally just feathers. They can be called ear tufts, but they're actually just feathers that sit on top of their head. They are used for intimidation and camouflage, and they actually can go back and forward depending on whatever their situation is. And so for the anime to kind of make the ear tufts of the owl turn into ears, that didn't make any sense, because that's not how owls' ears are, or gorillas, because they're more on the sides of their faces like humans are. Owls' ears tend to be on the sides of their eyes, and they're actually just these little holes. Some owls, they're actually asymmetrical too. So a hole on this side of their head is higher than maybe this side, which is lower, and that just helps them hear better. That's just a very special fact about owls. So I'm going to debunk this ear tuft thing that we see in the anime. Another thing about the owl that I would like to point out as fact is that owls can see in the dark. Of course, most nocturnal animals can see very well in the dark, because that's when they feel most active. That's when they're going to do most of their hunting versus hiding maybe or sleeping during the day. These are all of the facts versus myths that I picked up on in this episode about the bat and the owl Chimera Ants. If you have any questions about any of these things that I talked about, or want me to go more in depth about anything, please let me know. I love talking about animals, and I love relating it back to fandoms that I love so much. Also know that this is not a bash on Hunter x Hunter at all. Again, I just love educating people on the correct information about animals and not having people carry around these myths that we get from media a lot of the times that get it incorrect. Of course, some of these can be a translation thing. I watch this in Japanese, so of course there's going to be translation errors sometimes. Of course, these are just fantasy villains that were written to fight our protagonists, so that some of these things that they use are just their abilities and have nothing to do with the animals. However, I know a lot of the other ants that resemble other animals very closely resemble animals in real life and have their abilities. So these are just two that I kind of found had a little bit more fake information given than real compared to others. But if you want me to talk about any of the other Chimera Ant arcs or break down their animal abilities compared to real life, let me know. Again, I love talking about it. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Bye!